But joining me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Reid Fowler, Draftkings NFL and PGA Analyst. He frequently appears on Draftkings' flagship show, The Sweat, every night from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern. He's also a contributor on Draftkings' digital column, Draftkings Playbook, as well as other platforms as well. And as I said, he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Reid, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Doing well, man. So I did want to start with you about, maybe just a general NFL topic. At this point in the season, I like to ask people this question, so I'm kind of reappropriating it for you. Has there been a surprise for you so far this NFL? It could be on the field, it could be in fantasy. Has there been a surprise for you this NFL season?
No, but you usually get a group of players or position, right, that really gets hit by injuries. And we saw that with quarterbacks in the midseason. So it's given us guys like Kyle Allen, Gardner Minshew, a lot of these players that we really didn't have on our fantasy radars before the season started. And really, especially for DFS, have become guys that we can really use week over week. And so a guy like Kyle Allen this week is in a great spot. But, I mean, show of hands of how many people thought he would be fantasy relevant. So I think he's one of them. And just if you look at the Patriots, I mean, the Patriots defense, I don't think we really thought the Patriots defense in that first, even though their competition has been weak in that first 6 or 7 games or so, that defense played extremely well. Now, are they considered one of the better defenses like the Ravens and the Steelers? And probably not. But at the same time, I think that was a big surprise of how well they performed early in the season.
You mentioned defense. I feel like defense has become a great asset for a lot of fantasy players this year, because if you're someone who has, you mentioned the Patriots, but also other defenses. For example, the Packers had a nice little stretch on defense. The Ravens defense has been productive for people this year. The Steelers defense is getting Minka Fitzpatrick's, but at big points, I know, for me. So, I feel like defense this year has become a great asset and gaining a little bit of an edge for a lot of fantasy players.
Right, absolutely. It's become the kickers in defense, right? Those are the ugly stepchild of fantasy football. They don't, like, people don't realize, and people don't think, well, that it's important to pick the right defense in the right spots. And in the Patriots, throughout the season, throughout their run of being one of the top, now against the Ravens, they didn't fare so well and they came back down to earth. But you start talking about their points in terms of their value, they were, around QB 10, RB 12, right? If it just based off of points, that's where they would have ranked amongst other position groups. And now you have defenses like the Steelers for the second half of the season, who now need to be considered as one of the top defenses. They didn't do so well, against the Browns, or as well as they have been. But still, I mean, they get to the quarterbacks just as much as the 49ers and just as much as the Patriots. And so considering them one of the better defenses, or even in the spot starts like the Raiders. I mean, who would have thought that the Raiders would be a team that is A, in the playoff hunt, but also B, would be a defense that we can stream this week against the Bengals. So yeah, defense is absolutely a big part.
In our backyard, of course, we are the affiliate for the Eagles here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll have the game tomorrow, Eagles versus Patriots. What is your perspective on this, really questionable Eagles offense? Not just from a fantasy perspective, but just a general perspective. Because I feel like with Alshon Jeffrey being ruled out, with Jay Ajayi being brought in off the street, with Jordan Howard being questionable, it really feels like this Eagles offense is really going to have a lot more questions than answers for not just this week, but for the rest of the season.
Well, yeah, and I also think Deshaun Jackson, that was a huge injury, and him not being on the field. You saw the chemistry, and you saw how well the offense was running when he was on the field in that first game. And really, when you don't have him on the field, especially for Carson Wentz, who's a guy who likes to create when the pocket collapses, when he's a guy who can create on the run, who has one of the best arms in the NFL, that's a huge asset to lose. And yeah, absolutely. If you look at Alshon Jeffrey dealing with that ankle injury, he's very much up in the air. But look, if he does suit up, he'll have to go against Stephon Gilmore. And Stephon Gilmore, again, is arguably one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. But really what I do like about this offense is it's not all doom and gloom. And Jordan Howard, again, is also highly questionable for this game. I really like how they used both of their tight ends in that 12 personnel. They're running it more than half of the time on their offensive plays, and you really see a guy like Dallas Goedert, come into the fold as a not just a real life asset to that team, but a fantasy asset as well. I mean, there's a lot of weeks where, especially in DFS, you were saying, hey, look, Dallas Goedert is a much better play than Zach Ertz, given his price tag and his salary, and he's seeing these red zone targets. And so running that 12 personnel out of more than half of their plays is something that when you look at that coaching staff and Doug Peterson, if you trust in what they're doing. You have a lot of teams, right, like what we saw with the Browns and Freddie Kitchens. I don't trust that coaching staff, even though they won the game. I don't trust that coaching staff to move them forward. But Doug Peterson, with this team, especially with what they're dealing with, I trust him to get it right. So it's not all doom and gloom for the Eagles.
Reid Fowler joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Reid T. Fowler. That's Reid T. Fowler on Twitter. And Reid, one of the big questions in this area, I feel like now for 2 years, is Carson Wentz. So are you a believer, or is the jury still out for you on Carson Wentz?
I'm a believer. Look, I get that it's been a rough season for him, and when you just look at him from both a football perspective, he hasn't. Right, I think he's only thrown for more than 260 yards twice, and so when you look at what they need to do as a team, he needs to be better. But at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, when you look at just the personnel, he has to stay healthy. I think when you look at quarterbacks, especially in this league, health is a huge concern, especially this season. We start to see sort of the next coming of who's going to be these top quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson. Carson Wentz is still in that category because of what he can do, because of how strong his arm is. The prototypical quarterback is still going to be someone who has the arm strength of a guy like Carson Wentz. You just now have to put pieces around him that can stay healthier, and that's really why I like guys like Dallas Goedert. That's why I like guys like Miles Sanders. The outlook for the Philadelphia Eagles, especially on offense, doesn't hinge on Carson Wentz. I think he's still a guy that you can trust day in and day out, because if you look at the landscape of quarterback in the rest of the league, I would say 9 times out of 10 and twice on Sunday that I would choose Carson Wentz over at least more than half of the league, based on what he can do and based on how he can make plays when those plays break down. And that's what you see with guys like Patrick Mahomes, with Lamar Jackson, even Josh Allen to an extent. You see these guys creating plays when those plays break down. It's just a matter of getting the right players around him. If I were in Philly, I wouldn't worry about Carson Wentz. It's that defense, that secondary that scares me a little bit. So that's what I would change.
Reid, speaking of quarterbacks, one of the big quarterback matchups this weekend that I think most people are football fans are salivating over is the Deshaun Watson-Lamar Jackson game. It's part 2 after their matchup in college a couple of years ago. For you, what are really, the delineations between these two quarterbacks? We know they're both athletic, they both have great arms, they're both super talented. But for you, what is the real delineation for those two?
Well, with Deshaun Watson, he's fantastic, man. He's one of my favorite players, not just to watch, but to root for. And you root for him because you kind of see what's happening. You just hope he stays healthy, right? Because last year you saw that he had to catch a bus to a game. He was just in a world of hurt, and the offensive line doesn't really protect a guy like Deshaun Watson. And that's why he's so amazing, because if you just look at November and what he's been able to do, he's fantastic in the month of November. I believe his touchdown to interception ratio is 7-2, and the guy just wins in the month of November. And so when you look at just what he's been able to do, it's fantastic. And he is a guy that should be considered for the MVP based off of, look at all the injuries that team has had. Look at the personnel behind him. No one thought, again, that guys like Duke Johnson, Carlos Hyde as their running backs, losing Will Fuller every other game. Like, this guy is still performing at an impressive rate, making obsolete tight ends that you can consider streaming in fantasy football. So Deshaun Watson is fantastic, and he just needs to stay healthy. And Lamar Jackson, I mean, when you just look at what he's been able to do, just based off of, not really much experience, right? When you looked at him coming out of college in the draft, a huge knock on his game was that his footwork was not up to snuff. And I would argue that it was, because he has the ability to run, because you've seen how fast he gets out of the pocket, how he can change direction so quickly. His footwork in the pocket, if you really study what he's been able to do, has been fantastic. And he's been able to throw those passes because he could easily just run once that pocket collapses. And we've seen quarterbacks like a Derek Carr, for instance, that just run away when that pocket closes. But that's not Lamar Jackson. This guy is rock solid when it comes to being able to pass in the pocket. He's fantastic, and he's always a threat. And really, the line of demarcation between the two is not much, because these guys win games for their teams. The only thing that I would say is different is that coaching staff in Baltimore is one to trust a lot more. And so when you look at Lamar Jackson and really utilizing his strengths and building around him, letting him flourish, as opposed to maybe a Bill O'Brien and these guys in Houston where, hey, look, we're going to be trading for these pieces, but we're not necessarily going to protect our franchise quarterback. That would be the only line of demarcation for me that points a little bit in Lamar's direction. But Deshaun Watson is hands down one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Reid Fowler, Draftkings NFL and PGA Analyst. Follow him on Twitter at Reid. I remember with the PGA, there's always fun and unique opportunities to win with DraftKings, whether it's the DraftKings lineups or the DraftKings Sportsbook app here in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Reid, appreciate your time this morning.
All right, guys. Have a good one.